This week on the Wealthy Pilots podcast, am I saving too much for retirement? That might sound a little strange, or maybe we're not saving enough. Either way, we're going to get into that conversation with Scott and talk about some really smart viewer questions that have come in and use those as an example to break it down for others who might be in a similar situation. Let's get it going.
We've got some turbulence up ahead.
Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with Scott Osborn and myself as we talk investing, finance, and retirement. Scott is the airline advisor with retireairlines.com. That's retireairlines.com is where you can find him online. You can click on the show links below to get in touch with him and have a chat about your situation. And Scott, pretty interesting questions. We got a couple in from people listening to the show, which is always cool to see. But kind of want to talk about this. You and I were kind of chatting a little bit about, is there such a thing as saving too much for retirement? Because we often think about not saving enough. And I know you want to kind of do a little bit of counterpoint on both of these. So we'll get into that in just a second. But how you doing, my friend?
Doing great, Mark. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Looking forward to kind of getting your take on this because, again, like I said, everybody finds themselves in one of two camps with money, right?
Yep.
It's like I need more, or I don't have enough, or, I want, whatever the case might be. Seems like we always have these very stark contrasts when it comes to how we feel and associate about money. So we got a question in from a viewer and a listener who says, my wife and I bringing over $100,000 a year. We max out 2 401ks, an HSA, and a 457B, and still put away more into brokerage accounts. Yet I still feel like sometimes we're living paycheck to paycheck. We're also not living in our dream home, but I've prioritized retirement savings instead of putting a bigger chunk aside for down payment, things of that nature. Are we saving too much, right? So I guess the question is are we putting too much away in like the 401k or the traditional accounts? Is that a thing? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's always going to be the answer nobody wants to hear, which is it depends. It depends.
That's the advisor 101.
Exactly. And there's an old book on leadership, Stephen Covey book, where he talks about starting with the end in mind. And so that is a thought exercise that is vital to be able to answer this question. Am I saving too much or am I saving enough? I got to start with the end in mind. So you got to kind of envision, like, what is my retirement going to look like? Not necessarily in detail. I mean, this is like a 3-minute conversation. But hey, if we just kind of swag it out there and say, all right, well, hey, I need to live off of 10 grand a month. Well, if between Social Security, VA benefits, and your military pension, you're making 12 grand a month, guess what? I don't care what you're saving enough. But
fair point.
If you're used to living off of a captain's wage at $300,000 to $400,000 a year at one of our great airlines, and you got 200 grand in your 401k at age 50, you're in trouble, brother. I mean, we got some work to do. The good news is you got a good income and you can do a lot of that good work, but it depends. It depends on the person's situation. It depends on their goals. And I will say, like, frequently, one of the biggest things that we see is folks who have some sort of bias that's leading them to fall into one of these camps. Am I saving too much or am I not saving enough? And their bias leads them to do the opposite, if that makes sense. And so let me give you an example.
Okay, please.
Let's say, I'm in my mid 40s. I'm finally making, senior first officer or captain pay or whatever. And I'm finally making a really, really good wage. If I look back at my career, maybe I came in through the military side, or maybe I came in at, through flight school and I took out student loans. And then I was, spending a ton of my own money as a flight instructor and barely getting by. First of all, that first 10 years, let's say, many of these guys and gals are not putting money into a retirement account like maybe a corporate professional or somebody else who is starting right out of college and getting a 401k match and all that kind of stuff. So they're missing out on a solid decade of those contributions and growth. So that's going to put them, a good chunk behind up front. But then also they're finally getting into that stage where they're making good money. And it's almost, we see this in the medical field too, where they've been investing in themselves for so long. And maybe they're carrying either some student loan debt or hardly any assets because I was investing in myself for all that time, that I'm finally to a spot where I'm making good money. And, for a lot of these pilots, they're maxing the 401k every year. So when 5 years ago, I wasn't even hardly making $70,000 a year, and then now I'm saving $70,000 a year, in my mind, I can feel like I'm doing great. I'm maybe even saving too much, and I'm going to dial some of that back. The automatic contribution.
I want to live a little bit, so I'm going to dial it back.
Exactly. Yeah. And I understand that, but the risk there is first of all, if I'm 45, I got 20 years left to work, right? I mean, FAA is going to make me retire at 65. It's not like a lot of other professions where I'll just work longer if I'm not quite ready.
So you got 20 years to work and maybe 40 years to live, right? So you got 85, just kind of go with a simple number there.
Exactly. And so in that 20 years, I'm going to make a really good wage, but again, the IRS is going to cap what I can put in the 401k. And so I got to have an outside of 401k savings plan. That's one thing. What accounts am I going to go in? How tax efficient am I going to be? All those kind of things. So we got to figure that out. But then also we got to run some numbers and say, if I get accustomed to a $300,000 lifestyle, let's call it $200,000 after taxes, right?
Okay.
First of all, we got to inflate that for 20 years. So we're back up to $350,000. Okay. So after taxes, I want, let's call it $25,000 a month to live off of. That's what I grew accustomed to over this 20-year career as a successful airline pilot. It's going to take a good chunk of change to fund that in retirement. You're not going to fund that off of $1 million 401k. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to last. And so you have to fight those natural biases that I'm either not saving enough or I'm saving too much. Because I'll say the opposite is true. I've also found, folks who, join the military young, maybe they were even enlisted first, got a flight school slot, got their hours. They've been chugging away into their TSP all these years. Yeah. And then they're in their low 40s and they got $700,000 in their TSP. They're maxing their 401k. They got $100,000 in the bank. They got 2 rental properties and they're worried about, am I going to have enough to retire on? And again, it just comes from a little bit of their life experience and their background, and it ties back to their childhood and how they were raised, right? It's the same for all of us.
Hey everyone, real quick, if you haven't grabbed Scott's Financial Flight Control Toolkit yet, now is the time. This is packed with tons of helpful resources and tools like this, Scott's book, The Dichotomy of Wealth, which is a pilot's guide to maximizing wealth and cash flow in retirement. You also get access to some great guides like this one, Advice Matters, which breaks down 4 key ways a good financial advisor can help you boost your returns over time. And guides like this one on the pitfalls of emotions when it comes to investing, and this one on the HCM byline investment strategy, and more. So if you'd like your very own financial flight control toolkit, just click the link in today's show description, and Scott and the team will be happy to get one sent your way at absolutely no cost to you.
Do you find those like savings benchmarks things helpful for stuff like that? Like we've got an example we can throw in the show links for folks to check out from T. Rowe Price, and it kind of gives different scenarios, right? Do you find any of those online kind of calculators useful for folks if they're feeling kind of strange?
Me personally, I do not, and here's why. Here's why. Okay. Because so much of this is somewhat behavioral, and it's more like based on, do we have a clear vision of what we want? I mean, a lot of what we're trying to get nailed down, we can do with some back of the napkin math, right? Just to get some clear direction setting is going to be more important to driving what we need to do today. So again, with that same person who's got a good asset base and a couple rentals and all this stuff, like, you can just throw some numbers out there and look at retirement and say, hey, you guys can start to take those vacations. Your kids are only young once. Go enjoy some of this income. You don't need to save as much, and that's a very freeing realization to get to. Also, a very, motivating and encouraging realization to get to is like, man, I am not going to have enough in my 401k to sustain my retirement. So I'm either going to have to work when the FAA makes me retire, or I'm going to have to do something different now. Meaning save more, spend less, make better investment decisions, whatever the case is. And so, we typically are not going to accomplish that ideal retirement savings number by picking all the right stocks, right? I mean, a lot of that's going to come from avoiding some of these bad mistakes. I mean, investing in a buddy's business, or, buying some rental that is a bust, or, thinking you're going to kill it an Airbnb and then nobody rents it, or whatever the case is. I mean, there's an endless amount of things tempting us to go out there and make bad decisions. And so, many of it is just, a lot of this is just really trying to keep it simple. I mean, get a good financial order of operations in place. And then as your cash flow permits, just knock them out and get those things in place.
Well, so you got a flight plan, more than likely, right? Do you have a wealth plan, right? Do you have a retirement plan? Do you have a strategy on that? And some, a lot of the tried and true things that are out there, Scott, do work. But again, every situation's different, right? Every family or every household's a different lock that's going to require a different set of keys.
Absolutely.
So, putting a strategy together, again, you could probably use an online calculator, get a rough idea, do some back of the napkin. But ultimately, I think you do need to sit down. If you are truly having these thoughts like this listener or this viewer was, you need to really sit down and get in somebody's office and say, okay, let's start crunching some numbers and running some data here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, right? And I mean, in the details and, the details of,
they got a lot of stuff. They got some good stuff in there, right?
They got a lot of good things going on, but again, it's always going to be a little bit of that. It depends, right? And I think getting that, either that encouragement to save the right amount or getting that permission to spend,
right,
are two really good things that you're able to, use to make the right decisions and then behaviorally engage with your financial plan the right way. And it's not hard. Go ahead.
Yeah, you weren't an MP when you were in the service, right?
No.
Yeah, and you're not the military police, and you're not the money police, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's your job is to say, okay, look, here's the stuff, we got it all laid out. Yeah, I mean, I don't have to give you permission, but when you can see it in black and white, it's a great point you just made. Sometimes people just need to see that to go, okay, cool, because he does ask about, maybe I want to back off and live a little,
right?
Well, when you see it in black and white, it helps you do that, especially in down markets or down times like we're in right now.
Yes. Well, and again, that's where, again, like I love all the software on our side of it to run an analysis and, see what happens in scenario plan and retirement for if inflation's high and markets are down and there's a recession early and all those kind of things. That's all out there. That's all good. So we want to pressure test the plan. Don't get me wrong. But again, in terms of getting the foundations correct, it's not overly complicated, again, just getting some general direction setting around, do we need to be going north or do we need to be going west based off of the information we have and where we want to land? And then we can get a couple initial, numbers around how much you need to be saving to get yourself on track, or how much you can dial the savings back. And again, it's what do you want to do? Do you want to keep the savings rate high and you want to be ready to retire at age 55? You can do that too. Do you want to go all the way to 65? Do you want to go all the way to 65 and then have to work at Costco because you didn't save enough? That's fine too. I mean, it's because you wanted to enjoy it young. I mean, it's really up to you, but you just want to make those decisions from a place of power in terms of, hey, I'm informed and I'm making a good decision based off of the knowledge and insight that I have, and not making that decision from a place of, I got my head in the sand and I'm hoping it'll work out better later. Hope's not a strategy.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a great book, I think, that kind of goes really well from Morgan Housel called The Psychology of Money. Because a lot of times it's the psychology that we're fighting more than anything else, right? You can pull those numbers together, like you said, Scott, and you can do the napkin stuff and get the black and whites, but often you're just dealing with your own personal biases. So having that information helps you kind of sort that out and kind of figuring out your own psychology. Like, all right, I got to admit, like, I am who I am, and this is going to bother me, so let's do this or do that or whatever it might look like. So,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, and you want you and your spouse to feel good about the decisions that you're making.
And that's a whole nother question. That's a whole nother piece too, right? It's not just one person's thought, it's two, right? So you got to get both, you got to get on the same page there too.
Yeah. I mean, and so again, a very short, like minutes long discussion around, this is not like a month-long exercise you got to do. I mean, this is literally minutes. It's minutes of, hey, what do we think retirement's going to look like? How much money would it take per month? Well, we make X amount per now, and after taxes and paying for college and paying debts down, we're spending this much per month. Okay, we inflate it. We got to figure out how much that is per month. We back out maybe some pensions and Social Security, and that's the gap we got to fill in retirement. And then we just kind of, reverse engineer to see the portfolio sizes and then figure out if we're on track or not.
And if that doesn't sound like, oh God, that sounds daunting, well, then have the conversation with your spouse, your loved ones, say, what do we want retirement to look like? Just get a general idea and then go sit down with a financial professional who can help you with all that other stuff that you're not crazy about. And they'll put all that stuff into the system. And then you can start to get some actual tangible data that you can look at and go, all right, now we do need to pump in more, or no, we're actually pretty good shape. We're rolling right along, or whatever that looks like.
Yep. I mean, in all those items, and this is kind of piggybacking off after our last episode talking about, the economy being on the brink of a recession.
Right.
So many people want to focus on the economy. They want to focus on the market. They want to focus on what the S&P 500 did today or last week, or what it's going to do tomorrow, or what the futures look like, or whatever.
Right.
And again, I will say, like, that stuff matters, but you can't control it. Like,
for sure.
I mean, the amount of people that have insight into what's going on in that space and have no clue what they're going to spend on retirement. And that's what matters. I mean, what your tax situation in retirement is going to look like, what your health insurance situation, well, I mean, what your income plan is. Those are all things that nobody in the world is going to care about but you. So care about the things that you can control, get the insight, and take a little time to just get a vision of what your retirement's going to look like. Is it going to be right? Absolutely not. It's guaranteed to be wrong, because we're forecasting, maybe 2 decades into the future. Guaranteed to be wrong. But even if we're wrong, we're that direction setting, driving the right behaviors and habits. I mean, and again, as we refine that thing, by the time you're retired, we are significantly less wrong. And that's the exercise that we're trying to do here. I'm trying to be as the least amount wrong as possible with what we got going here, knowing it's impossible to be right. The problem is people have no vision, no goals, no, clarity around what that could look like. And it leads them to be way wrong. So again, if I got to go due west and I end up just a little bit off, I'm not right, but I'm close to it. But if I got to go due west and I went south, we're in trouble. Yeah,
for sure. And anybody who's married, you can relate to I just want to be less wrong.
Yeah.
I don't need to be right. I just want to be less wrong. So if you got some questions, you need some help, pilot, not pilot, whatever the case is. Obviously the pilot, this is something that Scott works with folks all the time. So, go to retireairlines.com, have some conversation, get onto the calendar, check out the toolkit that Scott's got. A lot of good stuff going on there. So the great ways to kind of get rocking and rolling. We got links in the show descriptions below for the different things this week on the episode. We'll put that calculator link in there. We'll put the links into Scott's website. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, support the channel, thumbs up and a notification bell so you catch new episodes when they come out. We try to drop these just about every week. So usually we're trying to put out some good content for you to consume, and hopefully it helps you along the way. Scott, my friend, thanks for breaking it down as always.
All right. See you soon.
We'll talk to you soon right here on the Wealthy Pilots Podcast with Scott Osborn.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.